Rohingyas have been, you know, driven out violently, through a, genocidal destruction of their villages. Over 300 Rohingya villages were burned in a matter of, several weeks, and nearly 1 million Rohingya, including children and pregnant women, had to flee for their lives. What is happening in Gaza happened in Burma. Two Rohingya people in 2016 and 2017, and they are also denied citizenship. So Rohingya people can be understood as, Palestinians of Southeast Asia.
Please listen carefully.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Whenever you listen to this podcast with me, Jess and Anna, welcome to Voicy Podcast by BBC, a podcast dedicated to highlight the stories around cross-cutting human rights issues across East and Southeast Asia. This podcast is an initiative of BBC Network, stands for Better Engagement Between East and Southeast Asia.
Voicy Podcast, the voice of East and Southeast Asia.
Today, we are going to discuss the situation that is experienced by the Rohingya communities. That, as we know, the number of Rohingya refugees arriving in Aceh between late 2023 to January 2024 has now reached nearly 2,000 people. Arriving in Indonesia, they are bombarded with hate narratives against them in the public. Well, as a person living in Indonesia, me personally, I observe that some of hate narratives that are often addressed by some groups to them. Some of these narratives include speculations that refugees are expelled from Myanmar because of their crimes, or that these Rohingya refugees will take jobs from the locals and become a burden to the state. Well, maybe, in my opinion again, the narratives that reject Rohingya refugees are partly due to a lack of understanding in the public about the root of the problems for which Rohingya people leave their homes and take dangerous and inhuman journeys seeking a better life, and the state's responsibility to protect human rights of asylum seekers.
All right, not just that, Jess. So this February 1st, marks the third year of the coup that happened in Myanmar by the military junta, which also affected the situation of Rohingya communities, both those who have fled to other countries and those who are still inside Myanmar. And that's actually the reason why in this episode, we aim to unpack the context behind why Rohingya people are so marginalized and vulnerable that they have no other choice but to seek asylum in neighboring countries, or not even neighboring countries, but very far away countries. While we also explore how the coup affected the conditions of the Rohingya communities.
Yep, Anna, very correct. And now, because we are going to talk about that, actually, we have someone who's joining us today who is very eligible to talk about the things that we mentioned earlier. He is an activist, he is a scholar of genocide, and we now ready to welcome him. Welcome, Maung Zarni. Thank you for attending this interview today.
Yes, hello, Maung Zarni.
Hi, thank you to both of you, co-hosts of this podcast. And I'm really happy to share, what I know about the Rohingya people and why they are fleeing, and also the situation for Myanmar in general and Rohingya people in particular since the military coup 3 years ago.
Before anything else, again, first, first of all, we'd like to thank you for accepting our invitation, and we are so honored to have you here. So, would you like to give like more introduction about yourself and your activities, or what do you do?
Um, well, I've been a human rights activist, uh, focused on the situation of Myanmar people across ethnic and religious identities. Although I came from a Myanmar Buddhist family with extensive ties to the Burmese military, because my family was anti-colonial, anti-fascist, and the Burmese military was established during the Second World War as the National Liberation Resistance Organization. But that organization has over 75 years turned into instrument of repression against our own people by the military leaderships over the last 60 odd years. And so I've been opposing this military coup, first as a student, not the coup, but the military leadership. We have had at least like 3 or 4 different military juntas since 1962. And I lived in Burma for the first 24 years of my life. And then towards the middle of 1988, when the whole country rose up, in a people power uprising, something similar to what you in the Philippines had experienced in 1986 against Marcos dictatorship. So, but at the time I was in the United States, already a student there, studying at a university. But that's about 35 years ago. But I've been, very active on Myanmar issues for, non-stop, really, the last 35 years. And I'm also involved in different international solidarity movements. Most currently, supporting the Palestinian liberation movement and mobilization against genocide. I'm also a trained academic, a scholar of authoritarianism. And the last 15 years or so, I specialized in genocides. Through different affiliations, particularly with the documentation center in Cambodia that documents genocide that took place in Cambodia under Khmer Rouge. And so, I travel very widely to speak on this subject. I have published both scholarly and newspaper essays on the genocide of Rohingya, and currently on the genocide of people in Gaza. That's my background. I've founded a number of human rights, networks, starting with the Free Burma Coalition in the U.S., and we had one branch in the Philippines in the 1990s, based in Manila. The last 4 or 5 years, I have been running, 2 networks that I co-founded. One is called the Free Rohingya Coalition, with my Rohingya brothers and sisters in the diaspora, and also the Forces of Renewal, which is a network of radical intellectuals and scholars and activists from across Southeast Asia. And so that's really my background. I taught in different universities, but I no longer work in university settings. I focused on writing, organizing, and running these, the activist platforms.
And so I would like to start the conversation about the content, about the substance. I would like to ask to you, Maung Zarni, that as mentioned in the beginning, the current situation about how Rohingya communities are being bombarded by hate narratives might be due to the lack of knowledge in Indonesia and might be also in other countries on the root of the problems that is now faced by Rohingya communities back in Myanmar. So, if you may tell us actually what are the situation of Rohingya people that make them need to take dangerous and inhuman journeys to seek safety, to flee from Myanmar.
Yeah. Well, the first thing to understand is, who the Rohingya people are, right? Rohingyas are a ethnic national group, from Myanmar. The Rohingyas can be found on the Bangladeshi side, because their homeland or ancestral land in northern Rakhine or Arakan shares 270 miles borders with the predominantly Muslim Republic of Bangladesh, right? Before it was called East Pakistan. And, like many ethnic people that live along what became national boundaries or borders, Rohingyas are also essentially binational people. Like some of them grew up on the other side of Burmese border in Bangladesh. Some of them grew up on this side of the Burmese border and they become part of Myanmar. And this is not a unique or exceptional situation. We are a post-colonial independent country after 120 years of British rule. I think like you have a similar situation in Indonesia or Philippines. When you become a post-colonial country after 300 years of Dutch and Spanish rules, the islands and the land and whatnot, they become concrete, meaning like before the boundaries were drawn, people move about, people are scattered in different places, different regions, but they consider themselves one ethno-linguistic community. They share language, they share their ethnic identity, they share their customs, right? But when the Burmese state was formed in 1948, boundaries were drawn and different ethnic people get split into different countries. We have Kachin, who are on the Chinese side and who are also on the Indian side, on the Burmese side, right? They have different names, but they speak the same language or similar language. And then we have Karens, we have Mon, we had Chin, and we have Shan. And so these are other groups that have different ethnic names depending on which country they have come to belong to as citizens. The only difference between Rohingya people and other groups, ethnic groups in Burma, is they are predominantly Muslims, right? And there are Hindu Rohingya and also a small number of Christian Rohingya, but they are largely the people of Islam, right? And because Burma is predominantly a Buddhist majority country, the Muslims have long, particularly Muslims and people of Indian subcontinental features or origin, like Aryan, Indo-Aryan features, like darker skin, and they are looked down upon, and they are seen as not indigenous to or native to Burma. They are seen as like people who came as a result of British colonial rule. There are some immigration of people of Indian origin, not India today, but Indian subcontinent. That includes Pakistan and now like Bangladesh, the three major countries now. But in the in the past, they are simply known as Indian subcontinent, and but under the British rule. And so, but they're also like the people who have been in Burma for hundreds of years, right? And there's a lot of Rohingyas are native to northern Rakhine, but they have been lumped under the category of unwanted, colonial era migrants. And now the British rule ended in 1948, and some of the migrants had stayed on because they put their roots down, and they, like 3 generations they lived there. But that's for those who arrived during the British time. But the Rohingyas have proven themselves through like historical records, primary sources, that they have been in that part of Burma, Western Burma, long before the British arrived. And they have their own language. But because, although the historical record prove their claim that they belong to Burma, in that part of particular Burma, across from Bangladesh, because their religion is Islam, the Burmese majority who are Buddhist are easily misled by the Burmese military propaganda that these are potentially Islamicists who wanted a piece of Burma's territory to set up an Islamic state, right? And so it usually, I think in the introduction you talk about, the anti-Rohingya, anti-asylum seeker rhetoric in Indonesia, where like the people fleeing persecution or for their lives or for a better life, they're seen as like a burden, or like they are criminals with criminal records, they are fleeing. It's like something that you find in a far right the societies, like Nazi Germany, for instance, or like Donald Trump's America. Or like in where I live in UK, we hear this rhetoric, the immigrants and the asylum seekers and refugees are coming to take the jobs, and they're going to drain our public finances and resources, and they're going to become criminals in this country as well. Like Donald Trump called them rapists and murderers. And so the first is to remember that this anti-immigration or anti-refugee rhetoric falls under the category of fascist discourse, and this is what Nazi Germany became Nazi Germany, because they look at like new generations of like Jewish people, the migrants, or like minorities that have been there, the non-German minorities that have been in Germany for centuries. They have been all of a sudden framed as, threats to national security, parasites that live off the mainstream German society, that kind of thing. But if you look at the numbers, they're really, really tiny number. They pose no threat to anybody. They are vulnerable people. And so I think like a lot of it is, political manipulation by politicians, especially around election times. They use this rhetoric and they want to divert public attention from the real policy and leadership issues of usually failures or public discontent. They derive public discontent towards the most vulnerable people, because the public is too busy to really study any issue in depth. So the public can be easily manipulated in terms of how they should feel about particular object. or subject. So like Rohingyas have no protectors, no powerful NGOs, no global society protesting for them like the Palestinian today. So that is the problem. Two issues. One is the political manipulation of vulnerable, tiny number of Rohingyas. I mean, you have Aceh State that have welcomed several thousand Rohingyas over the last 10 years. But Indonesia is close to 300 million people. I mean, like come on, like a couple thousand Rohingya running for their lives are not going to create any problem for a society as large as 300 million people. And secondly is to understand the root cause. The root cause is that Rohingyas have been, driven out violently, through a genocidal destruction of their villages. Over 300 Rohingya villages were burned in a matter of several weeks, and nearly 1 million Rohingya, including children and pregnant women, had to flee for their lives. What is happening in Gaza happened in Burma. Two Rohingya people in 2016 and 2017, and they are also denied citizenship. So Rohingya people can be understood as Palestinians of Southeast Asia. That's the best way to put it. They're denied economic opportunities. They're denied opportunities to study at any level. Say that there is about 1 million Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh. Half of them, like 500,000, are children or youth, have absolutely no school, no university, no opportunities to learn, right? And grown-ups have no opportunities to make their own living. They're living off handouts from UN and other INGOs. And so if you keep people in subhuman conditions, in which none of us would want to live, of course they're going to flee. When thousands of Rohingyas every year attempt to flee, risking their lives at sea, what that means is their lives on the land is hellish. So they're like, okay, all right, we're going to escape hell. If we make it across the South China Sea to Indonesia, or to Malaysia or to Australia, maybe we'll have a better life. Maybe half of the boat would die, but the other half will live and perhaps have a life. So that is why they are fleeing: persecution and subhuman conditions.
There's a lot of things that we just do. Thank you for that, Maung, Zarni.
I
Okay.
would thought that Rohingya people don't have like a representative.
Yes. Is your question, do Rohingyas have representative organizations or leaderships?
I guess so. Maung, Zarni.
Yeah, I think they do have Rohingya representatives, both in the Rohingya refugee camps in Bangladesh. Mind you, like that, there are more Rohingyas outside of their homeland of Myanmar than there are inside the country. Inside Myanmar, there are about 500,000 Rohingya. Yeah. Of course, they have their villages still, and some of these are the people that survived the attacks, because the attacks were focused on northern Arakan, and one or two towns escaped those attacks, and so the northern Arakan town of Maung and all the villages surrounding that area, that's like a 60-kilometer stretch of land, and all the villages on that land have been flattened, bulldozed, burned, bombed, in the 2016 and 2017, particularly 2017, wave of genocidal onslaught, and about 1 million in Bangladesh in refugee camps, and they are not recognized as refugees by the Bangladesh government. They are called forcibly displaced persons from Myanmar by Bangladeshi government officially, because Bangladesh, if they are recognized as refugees, well, refugees have their own fundamental right as humans, and so Bangladesh do not want to provide or recognize and honor the rights of Rohingya people as refugees. So they're not even accorded refugee standing, which is a legal standing, right? So they're simply framed as a forcibly displaced persons from Myanmar. And secondly, that's like 1 million there. Then you've got Rohingya diaspora. And then you've got Rohingyas, about close to 100,000 Rohingyas in Malaysia. You've got a small number of Rohingya diaspora across Europe and North America, and as well as in some Middle East countries, particularly Saudi Arabia. And so because of the nature of the Rohingya communities across the world, including in northern Arakan, 500,000 still there. It's really difficult to organize, and in other words, with the exception of Rohingyas in diaspora, the Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh or Rohingyas who are still inside Myanmar, they are not really allowed to form any type of the significant political organizations, right? And then if there are a couple of strong Rohingya leaders that emerge, like a few years ago, one Rohingya leader was assassinated in the refugee camps, and nobody tried to take his spot because they're all afraid. So they have to live under the 24/7 surveillance by Bangladeshi military intelligence. And so, but there are also, there's a small number of Rohingya organizations and youngish Rohingya leaders in, say, like UK or Germany, a few other places. They attempt to speak for the Rohingya people. But when you don't have a proper the organization that are rooted in the refugee camps in Bangladesh or inside Myanmar, it is difficult to establish something like the resistance organization like Hamas or the Palestinian Authority, which is the Reformed Palestinian Liberation Organization, PLO.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't say like they are completely leaderless, but it's a situation that has created that has led to this perception that Rohingya don't have leaders, because they're all scattered around the world, and the political restrictions and financial restrictions and others that they are confronted with, it's been rather difficult for them to develop a one umbrella organization that will represent Rohingya on the world stage. And still like a small number of Rohingya in leading activists have been able to speak as a spokesperson for their cause.
And I acknowledge that you also mentioned earlier about the refugee camp in Bangladesh. I believe that we are talking about one in the Cox's Bazar, right? So this might be actually a question that is frequently being asked by a lot of people. So as we know that this refugee camp in Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh, is very big, yeah. considering that is the largest refugee camp, and why is it still not enough to support the Rohingya communities?
Yeah, I've been to the refugee camps. At least I should say at least like 3 times,
Yeah.
and since that they fled the country in 2000, or the largest number fled the country in 2017. Starting in August. But I got there like a few months after the largest camps were set up. Number one, like the refugee camps are like an open air prison, right? They've got, and then I'm not entirely I'm not blaming the Rohingya, Bangladeshi government for having security concern. You've got 1 million people, about half of them are young people, men and women, students, student age, the population. No, the economic prospect and no access to school. And so the Rohingyas, they feel that, the food ration they receive from the, World Food Program and other organizations, like potato, onion, rice, maybe a little bit of oil. And so, and they're like, they live in these like really makeshift plastic tents. It's not even like proper tents like you would use for camping in Indonesia. It's like tarpaulin sheets, plastic sheets, right? That is used as a roof, on a thatch, or like a bamboo, little bamboo huts, that you find on farm, where farmers go and rest to get some shade from the sun. But that's their permanent homes, right? And so these Rohingya camps, they are fenced off. There are a number of different Rohingya refugee camps, and their freedom of movement is severely restricted. They cannot move from one camp to the other. And they have no electricity. After dark, the whole place is completely pitch dark. And then remember, like the Rohingya refugee camps were created by clearing some of the forests that Bangladesh used as animal sanctuary. Occasionally, the elephants would come in and attack, and also they're very close to, or the soil erosion. Bangladesh is flood prone. You've got like annual monsoons, storms, and so these are little, flimsy, plastic homes of Rohingya refugees. They get washed away, right? And then they're in a number of like, the 2 or 3 years, the fire would break out. Some of them are believed to be acts of arson. Because the homes are made of very flammable materials, and so in 2 years, there were over 200 incidents of fire. Because the camps were fenced off. When the one corner of the camp is engulfed in flames and whatnot, Rohingyas cannot flee to the other area because they are fenced off, and some of them died in the fire, right? So that's a situation. And the worst bit is a sense of complete and utter hopelessness. Like however difficult situation is, like we as humans live by hope, with hope that tomorrow will be better than today. Well, tomorrow may not be better than today, but like some of us at least have reasonable ground to hold on to that belief or hope that maybe tomorrow will be better. We'll have a bit better income or job prospect, or we will have a better opportunities for employment or enjoyment, whatever. But that's not the situation of the Rohingya. Think about it. UNICEF just issued the statement saying, or UNICEF or one of the UN agency, like humanitarian agency, issued just this week, 500,000, that's 500,000 Rohingya out of a little over 1 million Rohingya refugees in total in Bangladesh have no real opportunity to study anything. Yeah? You're not allowed to go to school. You don't have schools to go to. You don't have college. You don't have universities. You don't have opportunities to learn about farming or carpentry or fishing. All you have is time, and you have nothing else. And of course, a lot of Rohingyas would get preyed on by local Bangladeshi gangs that are engaged in cross-border smuggling of anything, from drugs to other contraband items. So young Rohingyas, they're boiling potato and eating rice and nothing else. So if you are offered a little bit of money to get involved in these activities, and you've got little brother and sister who are hungry, what do? You join the gang. Simple. And, if I were in their situation, I'll do the same thing. You'll do the same thing. You have to feed your old mom, and you've got a little brother who's really hungry, and you're 17 years old and no school, nothing. You cannot earn a penny. And then there's a Bangladeshi approaches you. Hey, do you want to carry this, back of something across the border? You go, right? And you become drug mules. And then all of a sudden, Bangladeshi authorities look at the entire 1 million Rohingya population as criminals. Of course, you are on the verge of famine and deprivation, and then when you try to get a little bit of money to feed your family, you become like a criminal. Maybe your acts are criminal, but the conditions leave you with no choice but to do anything to make a little money so that you can feed your little sister. Now that's the situation. That's the situation that they are running from. No human community can live in a subhuman conditions that Rohingya live in. By the same token, why do Palestinians rise up? Well, you lock them up for 17 years with not enough clean water, or no jobs, no universities to really, or no opportunity. You cannot leave the camp. Then you rise up. Simple. And Rohingyas are not rising up; they are fleeing. Palestinians are rising up. That's different.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much for that, for giving us a different perspective on why is this happening in the Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh. And I feel I feel them. If I were in this situation, of course, I will do the same, right? We have the instinct to survive. So I'd like to ask, sorry, again, I'll insert I hope I don't get cut off. So for those who doesn't know, this might seem like a silly question, but who is managing the refugee camps? So is it just by themselves, or the maybe the Bangladesh has also a participation in this one?
No, the Rohingyas don't manage their own camps. And there are a lot of us who want, to see Bangladesh support some kind of a community management by Rohingyas themselves. The Bangladesh don't strong leadership coming out of Rohingya community, right? They want puppets that would sing or dance to the tune of the Bangladeshi government. So the money to feed the Rohingyas and to provide whatever they need, at least bare minimum, some medicine and like NGO works and whatnot, that come primarily from the Western governments. I think that the United States is the largest contributor. I mean, U.S. is really the collaborating with Israel in the genocide over there in Gaza. But in the case of Rohingya, the United States is the largest humanitarian aid provider. Then also other, the wealthy Western countries also that provide the humanitarian dollars to the Bangladesh. The World Bank also provide the hundreds of millions of dollars to Rohingya humanitarian organizations, but they are all principally under the control of Bangladeshi government, right? You've got like the UN agencies are there, but in terms of camps administration, it's set up. It's run by the refugee management committee. I don't know what the exact name of it, but the camp administration is in the hands 100% of the Bangladeshi authorities. But ultimately, the control of the Rohingya camps and all Rohingyas are under the command of the Bangladeshi military intelligence, right? They call it Directorate of Field Intelligence. I think like DGFI, that's the name. The Rohingyas Rohingyas don't have Hamas. Rohingyas don't have a Palestinian Authority, right? So they're under there are a couple of armed Rohingya organizations, but they're not significant enough. They themselves, have to exist at the pleasure of the Bangladeshi government. There are two major armed organizations in the past 10 years. One is called like Rohingya Solidarity Organization, and the other one is called Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army. There was a rivalry between them, and the Bangladeshi government, shifted its support or tolerance to these two different organizations. And so, no, the refugees are not, managing their own lives. That they are under the strict control of Bangladeshi authorities.
So maybe let's try to get into the relationship of the coup in Myanmar and the current situation of Rohingya. What has been the impact of the military coup in Myanmar in 2021 to the situation of the Rohingya communities, both those who have fled to other countries and those who are still inside?
Consequence of the military coup in 2021 is a general shift in public opinion about the Rohingya people. Right, because like the Burmese public are predominantly Buddhist, but there are also like a substantial number of Christians among Kachins and Chin and Karens. They have come to understand what Rohingya suffered, because the military this time was using similar scorched earth military methods. I think the single most or repression against the anti-coup communities across the country. The military was burning down entire villages because there will be some like young Burmese or Kachins or whoever protesting against the coup. They were beheading or executing the young anti-coup Democrats or activists. They were burning, democracy activists alive. That kind of thing. And so that was happening across the country. And so the Burmese the public began to understand that the military was capable of doing this to even the majority Burmese Buddhist communities. So before they say whatever Rohingyas say was fake news, right? Fake stories. The Burmese public was misled by propaganda by the military that the Rohingyas were burning their own villages and run away to Bangladesh because in Bangladesh they were promised better humanitarian money and aid from UN. So therefore, they burned their own villages, not the military, right? So the Burmese people fell for the propaganda by the military. Now they themselves saw with their own eyes that the Burmese military was burning Buddhist monasteries or Christian churches, or the villages, or like a section of a neighborhood in some town. So they all of a sudden they realized we made a mistake of believing in this military propaganda. Now we are on the receiving end of similarly violent destruction at the hands of the military. So some of the public figures or opinion makers started to apologize to the Rohingya people, saying that we are really sorry that we did not believe when you say that the military was gang raping your woman or burning your villages or killing your people. Now we are suffering the same thing. So we are sorry, right? So that is like very, very significant, right? And some of us who attempted to influence the Burmese public opinion by countering the propaganda with facts, we did not succeed. But when the Burmese public majority themselves suffer similar fate, perhaps not genocidal, but similarly atrocious nonetheless, the public shifted its opinion. That's the most positive psychological shift in terms of public opinion. So what that means is the Burmese society is ready to accept the Rohingya as a part of our country, and they would like the Burmese. I mean, the Burmese public will welcome the return of Rohingya people, right? That's number one. But the other one is that you talk about, the 1 million Rohingya in Bangladesh and about 500,000 inside Myanmar and their plight. Well, Bangladesh government they continue to hope that if they are nice to the Burmese military, retain or maintain good diplomatic ties, economic relations with the Burmese military, maybe the Burmese military would take back 1 million people, right? Irrespective of anti-military democratic resistance, right? And they also believe that the Burmese military is not going to collapse, and so therefore they have to be pragmatic in terms of their primary goal of sending 1 million Rohingya refugees from Bangladesh back to northern Arakan or Rakhine of Western Burma. That's for 1 million Rohingya. And so they continue to do that. They try to get China's help to try to broker or persuade Myanmar military to start the repatriation process. But that didn't go anywhere. In terms of 500,000 Rohingya that remain inside Myanmar, well, they're protected under the Genocide Convention in 2022. 2020 January, 4 years ago, the International Court of Justice issued a similar interim order to Myanmar military. That the ICJ issued interim orders to Israel, to allow the humanitarian aid and to not commit anything that would be considered genocidal acts against Palestinians. So similar order was issued 4 years ago to protect the 500,000 Rohingya people, right? But they have not been they're protected by either Myanmar military or the anti-military or anti-coup Arakan army, right? So what is happening on the ground in the Rakhine State is intense military clashes between the Burmese junta and the Arakan army. Arakan army is primarily, or I would say almost exclusively, made up of Buddhist Rakhines, right? And then some of the Buddhist Rakhines were the perpetrators of genocide alongside the Myanmar military against the Rohingya people in 2016 and 2017. And they are the majority ethnic group in Rakhine State. They outnumber Rohingya by 3 to 1. So in other words, there are 3 Rakhines to 1 Rohingya in the Rakhine State. There are 2 major ethnic groups, and the Arakan army troops they encamp themselves. These are anti-coup, anti-military, Rakhine nationalist, armed groups, and they will come into Rohingya villages and they stay there, because they want to occupy different territories and they also want to take control of the Rohingya area. And so the Burmese, the junta, sent troops to attack the Arakan army troops, and the troops are in the Rohingya villages. So the Rakhine nationalists and the Burmese military, they fight, and the Rohingyas get killed from both sides in the process. So that's what's happening. And then, you read about smugglers, human smugglers boat arriving in Aceh province, in some places near Malaysia or whatever. There are also some the Rohingyas who attempted to flee northern Rakhine, where they are extremely restricted. Some of them are still in camps that are considered like semi-concentration camps, about 100,000 out of 500,000 remaining in Rohingya. And then the other 400,000, they are in villages where fightings are taking place or where they cannot go from one village to the another. So they're like open prisons, right? So they attempt to flee. Some take the overland route, some take the sea route. So the ones who take the sea route, if they survive the journey, they get to Aceh, or they can drift in the sea. But those who walk across, or hire trucks or whatnot to move from Rakhine to nearby states, they get arrested by the Burmese military and they get jailed, right? And so they don't have any documentation. They are not given citizenship. The last one generation, the last 25 years or even a little bit longer, the citizens of, Rohingya citizens, that is Rohingyas that had proper citizenship documentations, they have been stripped of their citizenship. If the immigration or military officer will ask, do you have a national ID card? And then you produce the ID card from your pocket, and then they take your ID card away, and you instantly in that spot, you become like the without documentation. The only document you have, they take away, and then they call you illegal straight away. And then their children, if the parents have no papers, children don't get any papers. And so you've got 1 or 2 generations of Rohingyas without any citizenship or legal documentation in their own home country. They didn't come from anywhere. They were born there. And so therefore, in that situation, they have no physical protection from fightings. No NGOs are in a position to protect them. The Arakan army is not really protecting them. The Burmese military was the one who committed genocide against them. So in that scenario, they run. They run through any possible means by boat or walking.
Maung Zarni, this is quite how to say, quite coincidence. While you just mentioned about how the Rohingyas communities flee to Aceh, right?
Yeah.
Like the people smuggling, and then you also mentioned about the legal aspects that they are mostly considered as illegal and something like that. So my next question actually about related to those two things that you just mentioned. So maybe the first one is maybe we could acknowledge that there are some countries offering special schemes to certain groups of asylum seekers, while these types of schemes are not available for all groups of people who also need protection and asylum. So there's kind of quote unquote discrimination towards asylum seekers. And the other thing is, this is related to what you just mentioned. There are not enough safe and legal pathways for some people who need international protection communities, such as Rohingya people, who have no choice but to take dangerous journeys. So, how do you see this? And if after you answering that, maybe I would like to also ask about what is the root of the problem of the situation. Yeah, about the first one, I could repeat that the first one is about the differences, different treatment that is applied to different groups of asylum seekers and refugees, and the other thing is about the lack of safe and legal pathways for some people who need international protection. Communities such Rohingya people, for instance, who have no choice but to take dangerous journeys like people smuggling.
Well, I think the first thing is, as you said, like we need to recognize and acknowledge that Rohingya situation is not just simply a humanitarian situation. Rohingya situation, the root cause is the genocide or genocidal persecution of Rohingya by the state of Myanmar. That included Aung San Suu Kyi's deposed National League for Democracy government. Remember, Aung San Suu Kyi went to The Hague to defend and deny genocide, before the International Court of Justice. In other words, Aung San Suu Kyi and Democratic Party, elected by the people of Myanmar, they were collaborators in the Rohingya genocide alongside the Myanmar military. Myanmar military did all the killings and burning. Aung San Suu Kyi and her Democratic Party provided the public relation and propaganda and legal cover for the genocide. So the first thing is like to recognize that Rohingyas are victims of genocide, not criminals coming to your country or any other places, right? The second thing is like, that perspective needs to be promoted through local media networks that, using local languages that, like Myanmar, most of the Myanmar people, I'm sure like a lot of Indonesians do not read or watch English language news. And so for activists and educators in Indonesia and Southeast Asia, this is the facts need to be promoted. They don't need embellishment. We don't need to embellish the situation of Rohingya. Just present facts as they are. Yeah, they are victims of Myanmar state's genocide. Secondly, that's for the public, across Indonesia and Southeast Asia. Secondly, once the public realize that, the Rohingyas are victims of genocide, and then the public should question the secondary or double persecution of the Rohingya by respective ASEAN governments. If people are running away from fire and rape and killing and all that, you don't beat them up. You offer them a bottle of water, a pack of lunch or a blanket or a bed for them to stay the night, right? Maybe like mobilize resources to house them if there are more than a couple of people, right? And instead of trying to uh, you know uh, create the Rohingya or frame the Rohingya as simply humanitarian issue. The ASEAN governments and ASEAN as a whole, need to say, well, you know what? There is a genocide case going on at the International Court of Justice in The Hague against the state of Myanmar. In other words, Myanmar state is being tried by the United Nations highest court of member states for the crime of genocide. And they haven't reached a final ruling because the evidence is still being examined, for the last 4 years or 5 years. But that doesn't mean that, Myanmar state ought to be treated as a fully fledged, the member of the ASEAN. Maybe ASEAN should consider that, also should prepare how they would treat Myanmar representative, whether it's coming from the, democratic resistance group or the military, if the International Court of Justice issue the final verdict or ruling that Myanmar committed genocide, right? Well, then you've got to ask questions, is ASEAN a bloc that welcome criminal members, or will they take, the Myanmar state as a responsible party in the genocide and demand that they repay the damage done to the Rohingya people? We're talking about several million people whose lives have been destroyed, right? 500,000 people growing up with no education. That is a major destruction of a people. You see what I mean? Because these people with no real school or literacy or skills or education, they are, that's Rohingya peoples and their future. Their future is being destroyed. So Myanmar state has to be asked to pay, in economic and financial and institutional terms to rebuild the Rohingya community, right? If you break it, you fix it simple. You walk into a store, by accident, you break something valuable, the owner will ask you to pay for the price. They will, you will not have to go to jail, but you at least have to pay if you break something. Simple. So we are looking at a situation where a people has been destroyed, and the destroyer or the state that is responsible for the destruction of an entire people has to be asked to bear the cost of rebuilding that community. Yeah. And thirdly, you talk about pathway for legal residency. Well, you've got in Malaysia, you have 100,000 Rohingyas. I think 80% of the refugees in Malaysia are Rohingya people. Well, I mean, UNHCR issued ID cards. The United Nations Human Rights, United Nations High Commission on the Refugees issued ID cards, and they have a little bit of breather, but they've been there for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and they have children, right? And then those children are not allowed to study in any Malaysian school. And there are a handful of NGOs that provide a little bit of education, but that's not really education. But I'm thankful that they are doing this education work, but the resources are not there. The infrastructure is not there. So why don't Malaysian government, choose to provide some education, access to education, allow the Rohingya to study Malay, to study English language, to study their own language, right? And computers, whatever, right? So they can at least make a living for themselves, even if they're not able to return to Burma yet. The same for the Indonesian government, and our Chinese provincial government. They are not going to. They are very weak and vulnerable people running away from subhuman conditions. Why do you want to persecute people who have been victims of genocide? That is, in my mind, that is not behavior or policy befitting a community that want to be known as civilized or cultured or humans. What is the point of being human if we are going to rape the rape victims again, or persecute the persecuted human again? Being humans and a community of humans, in my view, have to have two things. One is like a conscience / principle, and the other is kindness. And it doesn't matter whether you are government or national or business, if you cannot display either conscience or compassion, you are not really a human community, not by my book.
All right. Thank you for giving the context on how the ASEAN community, the ASEAN countries or the communities can help the Rohingya communities as well. And I do agree with some of the points that you have presented, that everyone should have the right to education. And hopefully the other countries will follow these steps as well. So you have already talked about the ASEAN context, right? So how about in the international community? So what should be done by the international community to ensure the rights to international protection and international solidarity of people of the world, to advocate for the rights of people fleeing political persecution or conflicts and other human rights violations?
Well, firstly, I hate to say this, there is no such thing as international community. What we have is a system of political states that pursue their economic and geostrategic interests, right? They're not driven by any human concerns. They make statements. Secondly, we have the most powerful body in the world called the Security Council. Security Council is essentially in paralysis. It's been paralyzed forever. It cannot do anything because those who run the Security Council with their veto powers, none of the permanent member of the Security Council act in conscience or in principles or with compassion toward any issue. And some are worse than others, and it depends on the issue. And so the regional associations like European Union or Association of Southeast Asia, Asian nations, they also promote their corporate or commercial interest or pursue their military alliances and interest, and the welfare of human beings, their national or regional communities or refugee communities. These issues that are most important to all of us, ordinary people, do not drive policies of any organizations. So what we are left with is just us. That is the people within global civil society and civil society networks like yourself, like myself, others who feel that we must look after the fellow human beings, irrespective of where they are from, what class they belong to, or what god they worship, right? if some populations are in distress or in need, like what we're seeing in Gaza, or in like Rohingya situation, then we have to pool our resources and pool our energy and create the grassroots, build up the grassroots power. And inform the different societies and communities of facts, as opposed to these like neo-fascist and fascist narratives that frame the persecuted as criminals, like Donald Trump has done, like the Tories in the UK have done. And so yeah, basically, unless we inform our respective national publics that we must behave as the good and kind human communities, and we must not re-victimize the victims that are fleeing persecution. We must not rape the rape victims. We have to provide refuge and support for those who flee persecution, particularly genocide in countries like Burma, right? And also I think in terms of Western world, with so much money and technology and network and influence around the world, we can't expect much from this the Western world, because they treat white Christian Ukrainian radically different from Muslims fleeing from Afghanistan, or like a Rohingya, you see. And because we live in the world where the wealthy, developed, economically rich Europe and North America, Australia, they don't see non-white, non-European people as equal humans.
Yep.
And because they don't see all of us as equal to their human status, brown people, black people fleeing or dying like flies don't really concern them. You look at how the Europe and North America and Australia react to slaughter of over 10,000 Palestinian children in 100 days in Gaza, right? So we're talking about several hundred Rohingyas, or even several thousand Rohingyas fleeing on boat. Nobody knows, because the Western media don't really cover Rohingya very much these days.
Yes.
And so, even if the issue gets headline coverage, Western world don't care about the brown people, black people, yellow people running away from killings and starvations. As a matter of fact, the Western world, is a major contributor to these persecution and exploitation by their collaboration with authoritarian regimes to get oil or access to natural gas, or to make a trade agreement. So I think in that scenario, the best hope for any persecuted minorities or oppressed people is other people from the civil society networks around the world.
So actually, Maung Zarni, thank you for that. And actually, the previous one supposed to be the last question. But since you said that I assume that from what you said, you were saying that you don't believe in such kind of international community. I would like to ask about what about the international solidarity? I'm not talking about the state. I'm talking about the fellow people of the world. So what should be done by us as a fellow citizen, as a fellow people of the world, to do something to advocate the rights of the Rohingya communities, as well as all the victims of genocide around the world?
Well, you're already doing it. I mean, Jesse and Daniel, you're trying to get the facts out, the facts behind the arrival of Rohingyas in Aceh, right? Why they are fleeing? Yeah, the root causes that drive them away from refugee camps and their home. And so, like to get the truth out, that is the first step. The public will not do anything, unless they know the facts. Even if they know the facts, they're still not going to do anything yet. So you need to spread the truth, and you need to provide them with spaces or networks where they can join, say, your organization or other networks, or where they can donate, a few ringgit a month. Say, okay, all right, why don't you drink one coffee less a month? And don't drink one cappuccino. If you care about human beings,
Yep.
not having one cup of cappuccino, only 1 month. That I don't know how much ringgit, or like your Indonesian currency, but just one cup. Okay, don't drink one cup of coffee a month. I'm not talking about don't give up one cup a day. I'm talking about out of 31 days, can you donate the money that is worth one cappuccino from Starbucks and give it to, and plus that Starbucks ought to be boycotted because they are involved in the genocide in Gaza, and then so that one is join the networks, come out and protest against government policies if they happen to be engaged in policy of double persecution of the ones who are already persecuted. Protest in front of Myanmar embassy, maybe write a letter to the newspaper, say, hey, look, we heard the Rohingyas are victims of genocide. Why is our country, why are the people talking about them as if they were criminals? They are victims of genocide. They are not criminals. Just a few lines, and write something on Facebook or Instagram, or maybe use TikTok and say, oh, I just heard on Jesse and Daniel's network that Rohingyas are victims of genocide. Well, just donate 2 minutes of your time, and then record a TikTok message and spread it around in your local language, right? And don't forget, organizing doesn't have to be on a grand scale. It can be done every day. Everyone has a phone, and you can record yourself just 1 minute in Bahasa Indonesian and say, hey, don't attack the Rohingya. They're fellow humans, or they are Muslims. You call yourself Muslim country. You know what I mean? Or it doesn't even matter they're Muslims. So what matters is that they're humans. And then we in Southeast Asia need to shift the perspective based on identity of religion, or nationality or geography, or whatever. Just say we need to spread this consciousness that fellow humans, being fellow humans, is reason enough for other communities of humans to do something. Even if you say a stray dog on the street, being bitten by a group of other dogs, you have to intervene. That's not fair. One little dog, hungry and homeless on the street, other dogs being chasing him, then you have to stop the other dogs. You see what I mean? And that's the dog. But if that kind of thing is done to other humans, you have to stand up. You don't ask, are they Muslims, or are they Christians, or do they speak Bahasa Indonesia, or are they speaking Tagalog, or you don't ask those questions. When you see people, humans, in distress and in need, You don't ask for their ID. Are you UNHCR ID holder, or do you have a citizenship or permanent resident? You don't ask them. If someone hit a human being in front of you with a car, you don't check their ID. You don't check, their sexual orientation. Are you a gay person or transgender? What you do is like, okay, you bleeding. We need to stop the bleeding. Or you need to be taken to hospital. Okay, we're going to drive you to the hospital. That's the kind of thing that I consider, human response. And the rest is like, less than human response.
Thank you, Zarni. I think the answer to that is what's written on Jess Cup.
Oh, yeah.
Fuck racism, yeah.
Fuck
So I
racism.
like the suggestions that you have made. It's very easy and very practical. So to all of our listeners out there, so we can do something even just on a very small scale. Yeah.
Yep.
So stay on TikToks, that's very helpful. Sharing infographics, and be a catalyst for facts, and not be persuaded by fake news, because fake news is literally
Yep.
what is in the country, right?
Be a
So-
counter narrative to such hate narrative towards the communities around you, like something that seems small, but actually that's very important.
Yeah,
Right.
very impactful.
Remember, oceans are formed of little water drops. Oceans.
Yeah.
And you can have tsunami with little drops if they're strong enough.
Yeah.
Is it the ripple effect? Am I correct? I don't know. I'm just saying some words here. So, I think we had a very great conversation this night.
Yep.
So it's
Yep.
been like an hour full of insights, full of education on the situation of Rohingya people, and as well
Exactly.
as their situation and the history, of course. And of course, we're also talking some stuff related to Palestine and on Gaza and the Israel conflict. So it's very 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 educational episode, I might say. So Jess, would you like to do something?
No. I just this 1.5 hour we had this conversation is very fruitful. I mean, it's very eye-opening for all of us here to really know about the real situation of why Rohingya people being persecuted, being victims of genocide in Myanmar, and why they have to run away, why they have to flee just to save their lives, just to save their families, just to save themselves, and that's quite heartbreaking to know that after all of those situations they've been faced, they still have to face another kind of discriminations in their new places, in their new, let's say, in the refugee camp in Cox's Bazar, in Aceh, and in so many other places in the world. So I really hope that this kind of conversation could be duplicated in so many places, so more people get to know about what is happening actually, not only from the what Maung Zarni said, Western media. And I really just want to thank Maung Zarni for having this
Yes.
conversation with us. Such a
Yes, we
fruitful
really
conversation.
learned a lot on
Yeah,
this
thank you
topic.
so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Maung Zarni.
Yep.
I hope you had a great time.
Thank you. Yeah.
And to you, our listener who listen to this podcast, who wants to know more on migration and human rights issues, follow us in our social media accounts at BBCORG in Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter or X to stay updated. And that's it. Thank you for listening to today's episode, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.